So there I was, shackled like a Christmas turkey on the bridge of the Vengeance of Zalkar, which, by the way, has got to be the most overcompensating ship name in galactic history. I mean, who names their prison transport after Vengeance? It's like calling your minivan the Death Crusher Supreme. But hey, that's alien psychology for you. Captain Veltara, all 7 feet of purple, scaly disappointment, was lecturing me about the error of my ways. Again. You'd think after the 15th speech about bringing shame upon the galactic community, she'd get the hint that I wasn't exactly taking notes. But no. Here she was, waving her forearms around like she was conducting some cosmic orchestra of moral superiority. "Human Jake Morrison," she announced in that pompous way aliens do when they think they're being official. "You have been found guilty of smuggling contraband across 17 star systems, evading galactic authority, and the destruction of 3 enforcement vessels." "Technically," I interrupted, because apparently I hate living, "I only destroyed 2 vessels. The third one just had really bad maintenance. Not my fault your people cheap out on hull repairs." The look she gave me could have powered a small space station. Pure, concentrated disgust mixed with the kind of confusion you get when your worldview meets a brick wall doing 90 miles per hour. See, here's the thing about aliens. They've got this adorable little misconception about humans. They think we're some kind of soft, squishy prey species that got lucky with technology, weak little pink things that stumbled into space travel by accident. The Galactic Council's official classification for Earth literally translates to harmless dirt farmers with delusions of grandeur. Which, honestly, is exactly how we like it. "You will be transferred to Sector 7 Maximum Security," Velter continued, apparently determined to finish her little speech. "Perhaps a few years breaking rocks on Gehenna Prime will teach you the value of civilized behavior." I couldn't help but grin. Kalina Prime? That's cute. I've heard their rock chicken quotas are pretty reasonable, very humane working conditions. The captain's eye twitched. All 4 of them. It was like watching a neon sign having a seizure. "However," she said, and oh boy, here came the good part, "due to overcrowding, you'll be sharing transport accommodations with another prisoner." Now, I've been around the galaxy a few times, I know that tone. That's the tone of someone who thinks they're being very, very clever. That's the tone of someone who's about to deliver what they think is a death sentence, with plausible deniability. "Let me guess," I said, "not another tax evader?" Veltara's mandibles clicked in what passes for alien amusement. "Your cellmate is from Scarven, a warrior of considerable reputation." Scarven, Death World number 3 on the Galactic Do Not Visit list, right behind that planet where everything is on fire, and the one that's just screaming rocks. Home to some of the nastiest apex predators in known space. "How considerate," I replied. "I was just thinking this trip needed more attempted murder." The guard behind me snorted, which earned him a glare from the captain. Even the hired muscle thought this was overkill. But Veltara was committed to her little plan. She probably figured she'd deliver 2 problems to Gehenna Prime instead of 3. 1 human corpse, and 1 very satisfied predator. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that humans have been sharing space with apex predators for about 300,000 years. We called them dogs, cats, and roommates. This was going to be fun. The holding cell was what you'd expect from a budget prison transport. Gray walls, gray floor, gray ceiling, and the lingering smell of despair with just a hint of industrial disinfectant. Very feng shui if your goal was to crush the human spirit. Too bad they were dealing with a human who'd already had his spirit professionally crushed by 3 divorces and the IRS. The guard, a nervous little slug creature named Pip Talk, was practically vibrating with anticipation as he shoved me toward the cell door. Poor guy was probably taking bets on how long I'd last. I was tempted to ask him what odds he was giving, but then the doors slid open, and I got my first look at my new roommate. Cricstall was, in a word, impressive. 9 feet of pure muscle wrapped in midnight black scales, with claws that could probably open a can of beans or a jugular with equal efficiency. His head was somewhere between a crocodile and a shark, if both of them had gone to the gym religiously for about 10 years. When he looked at me, his eyes glowed like yellow headlights in a very unfriendly tunnel. He was currently doing what I assumed passes for meditation on Scarven, which involved a lot of controlled breathing and the occasional display of those aforementioned can-opener claws. The moment I walked in, though, he went perfectly still, in that way predators do right before something very unpleasant happens to something very small. "Well," I said, dropping my prison duffel bag on the floor, "this is cozy. I'm Jake. I assume you're the welcoming committee." Cricstall tilted his massive head, probably trying to figure out if I was having some kind of mental breakdown. Most species, when faced with 9 feet of death-dealing nightmare fuel, tend to do things like scream, faint, or soil themselves. Sometimes all three if they're really committed to the experience. I, on the other hand, was examining our accommodations like I was shopping for real estate. Bucks are a bit small, I continued conversationally, but the ventilation seems decent. How's the food situation? Please tell me they don't serve that gray protein paste stuff. I'd rather eat my own shoes. The predator rose to his full height, which was considerable, and let out what I can only describe as a growl mixed with the sound of a chainsaw having an argument with a garbage disposal. It was probably meant to be intimidating. It was certainly loud enough to wake the dead. "Cricstall of the Blood Ridge clan," he rumbled, in a voice like an avalanche with a bass guitar. "You are the human prey." "Guilty as charged," I replied, settling onto the lower bunk like I was checking into a hotel. Though I prefer logistically challenged entrepreneur. Sounds more professional. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Cricstall was clearly expecting me to do something prey-like. Maybe cower in the corner, beg for mercy, offer to shine his claws, whatever passes for submission among his people. Instead, I was acting like we were college roommates meeting for the first time. His confusion was almost palpable. You could practically see the gears turning behind those glowing yellow eyes. This was not how the food chain was supposed to work. "You do not fear me," he stated, like he was trying to solve a particularly complex math problem. "Should I?" I asked, genuinely curious. "I mean, you're definitely scary looking, but so was my ex-mother-in-law, and I survived Thanksgiving dinner with her for 12 years running." Cricstall's tail, which I hadn't noticed before, started doing this slow, hypnotic swish. In nature documentaries, that usually means something's about to become lunch. "I am Apex Predator," he declared, apparently feeling the need to establish his credentials. "I have slain the great sandworms of Scarven. I have bathed in the blood of my enemies. I am death incarnate." "That's nice," I said, pulling out a contraband candy bar I'd somehow managed to smuggle past 3 security checkpoints. Human ingenuity at its finest. Want half? And that, ladies and gentlemen, was the exact moment when 9 feet of Apex Predator experienced something his species had probably never encountered in their entire evolutionary history. Genuine confusion about the food chain. The look on Cricstall's face was priceless. It was like watching a lion realize the gazelle just offered to split a pizza. The candy bar thing really threw him. I mean, really threw him. Cricstall stared at that little chocolate rectangle like it was some kind of alien artifact, which technically, from his perspective, it was. His nostrils flared and I could practically see his predator brain trying to process this unprecedented situation. Potential prey offering to share food with Apex Predator. Does not compute. "What is this?" he asked, leaning forward with the kind of caution you'd use when approaching a potentially explosive device. "Chocolate," I said, breaking it in half with the most casual snap I could manage. "Earth delicacy. Fair warning, though, it's got caffeine, so if your species isn't used to stimulants, you might want to start small. Last thing we need is you bouncing off the walls all night." I held out half, and for a moment I thought he might actually take my hand off. Instead, he delicately picked it up with claws that could have carved stone, examined it like a scientist studying a new species, and then tentatively took the tiniest possible bite. The change was immediate and hilarious. His eyes widened, his pupils dilated, and his tail stopped that menacing swish and started doing something that looked almost like wagging. If a 9-foot death machine could look confused and delighted at the same time, Cricstall nailed it. "This is..." He paused, searching for words. "Not terrible." High praise from an apex predator. I was practically glowing with pride. "Yeah, humans are pretty good at the whole making things taste better than they should thing. It's one of our few marketable skills, along with being unreasonably stubborn and holding grudges for geological time periods." He polished off his half in 3 careful bites, and I could see him trying to figure out the social implications of this transaction. On his world, sharing food probably meant something very specific in the predator hierarchy, but here was this small, soft creature just casually sharing premium resources like it was no big deal. "You are strange prey," he finally said, settling back onto his haunches. "You do not behave correctly." "That's because I'm not prey," I replied, stretching out on my bunk. "Common misconception. Humans aren't actually a prey species. We just kinda look like one if you squint and don't do your homework." Cricstall's head tilted in that way that suggested I had his full attention. "Explain." So I did, and let me tell you, Explaining human nature to an apex predator is like trying to describe color to someone who's been blind their whole life. You have to get creative. See, back on Earth, we've got this thing called an ecosystem, right? And in this ecosystem, we've got actual prey animals. Things like rabbits, deer, gazelles. They're fast, they're nervous, they spend their entire lives looking over their shoulders for things that want to eat them. Cricstall nodded. This made sense to him. Then we've got predators, lions, tigers, sharks, things like that. They hunt, they kill, they eat the prey animals. Simple food chain, everybody knows their place. Yes, Cricstall agreed. Natural order. Right. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Humans aren't actually part of that system. We're what you might call outside observers who occasionally participate. We don't run from predators, we don't spend our time grazing peacefully, and we definitely don't huddle together for safety. I could see him processing this, trying to fit it into his world view. Instead, I continued, we do things like capture predators and keep them as pets. We swim with sharks, for fun. We climb mountains where things live that could kill us just because the mountains are there. We domesticated wolves. Cricstall. Wolves. We turned apex predators into creatures that fetch our slippers and do tricks for treats. His tail had stopped moving entirely. This was clearly blowing his mind. And the really crazy part? We did all this without claws or fangs or natural armor, or any of the things you'd normally need to survive in a world full of things that want to eat you. You know what our natural weapons are? Thumbs and spite. That's it. I pulled out another contraband item from my stash. A small photo of Earth. One of those tourism shots that shows the blue marble in all its glory. This is our planet. Looks nice and peaceful, right? Wrong. This place is a death world that makes Scarven look like a relaxing spa vacation. We've got predators in the water that can bite boats in half, microscopic organisms that can kill you in minutes, plants that are actively trying to murder you, and weather patterns that regularly try to wipe out entire continents. Cricstall leaned in closer, staring at the photo with new interest. And we live there by choice. We could have terraformed other planets, made nice safe places to live, but no. We like our death world, we call it home. We get homesick when we're away from it too long. I could practically hear his mental gears grinding as he tried to reconcile this information with everything he thought he knew about prey species. There's a saying on Earth, I continued. It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. Most species try to eliminate danger from their environment. Humans figured out how to thrive in dangerous environments. We don't avoid the monsters have nightmares about. We become the monsters have nightmares about. The predator was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation. When he finally spoke, his voice had a different quality to it. Less growl, more genuine curiosity. You are saying humans are also apex predators. I'm saying humans are whatever they need to be to survive, and we've needed to be a lot of things over the years, prey when it suited us, predators when necessary, and occasionally something else entirely. A few minutes later, I reached into my bag and pulled out one more surprise. A small electronic tablet loaded with nature documentaries from Earth. Another successful smuggling operation. Want to see what I mean? I've got some educational videos. Fair warning though, some of this might be disturbing. Earth doesn't believe in pulling punches. Cricstall nodded eagerly, and I fired up a documentary about honey badgers. 20 minutes later, I had a 9-foot apex predator staring at the screen in what could only be described as horrified fascination. "Preacher," he whispered, "is smaller than you." Yep, and it just picked a fight with something 10 times its size, and won. It does not care about the poison. Nope, honey badgers pretty much don't care about anything. They're basically concentrated spite in a fur coat. This is what you consider normal on your world? Honey badgers, they're actually pretty tame compared to some of the other stuff. Wait until you see the hippos. By the time we got through the hippo footage, Cricstall was looking at me with something approaching respect. And when I showed him the video of a house cat staring down a black bear, I think I broke something fundamental in his understanding of the universe. "Your species," he said slowly, "is insane." That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all week. And that's when I knew we were going to get along just fine. I should have known our little interspecies bonding session was too good to last. We'd just finished watching a documentary about Australian wildlife, which had left Cricstall questioning everything he thought he knew about planetary ecosystems, when the ship's comm system crackled to life. "Security sweep in 15 minutes, came the announcement in Captain Veltara's distinctly annoyed voice. All prisoners prepare for cell inspection. Cricstall's ears perked up, which was interesting because I hadn't realized he had ears until they moved. This is not normal schedule, he rumbled. No, I agreed, it's not, which means our dear captain has probably realized her little plan to feed me to you has hit a snag. I started casually packing away my contraband electronics and snacks. She's coming to check if there's enough of me left to process through Gehenna Prime. The Predator's yellow eyes narrowed. You believe she will be displeased to find you intact? Oh, I know she will be. The question is what she's going to do about it. We didn't have to wait long to find out. The security sweep arrived exactly on schedule, but instead of the usual 2-guard team doing a routine check, we got 6 heavily armed officers, led by Captain Velter herself. All of them were wearing full combat gear, which seemed like overkill for a simple inspection. Unless, of course, you weren't planning on anyone surviving the inspection. Velter took one look at me sitting casually on my bunk, clearly uneaten and annoyingly cheerful, and her eyes started doing that twitching thing again. But it was her reaction to Cricstall that was really interesting. The Predator had positioned himself between me and the door, and he was giving the security team the kind of look that suggested they might want to reconsider their career choices. How? She began, then stopped herself. Prisoner Morrison, step away from the Scarven warrior. I'm good right here, thanks, I replied. Cricstall and I were just discussing Earth's wildlife preservation programs. Fascinating stuff. Her mandibles clicked rapidly, which I was learning was the alien equivalent of gritting your teeth. The creature should have eliminated you by now. Wow, I said, putting on my most innocent expression. That sounds almost like you were hoping something bad would happen to me. Good thing I'm naturally trusting, and would never assume a Galactic Council officer would deliberately endanger a prisoner. The security team was getting nervous. You could tell because they were checking their weapons, and making those little throat-cleaning sounds that armed beings make when they're trying to work up the courage to do something stupid. Step aside, Predator, Velter ordered, apparently deciding to try the direct approach. We are removing the human for additional processing. That's when Cricstall did something that probably violated several laws of physics and definitely violated Captain Velter's understanding of Predator behavior. He growled. Not at me, not at the universe in general, but specifically at the security team. It was the kind of growl that starts somewhere around your ankles and works its way up through your entire skeleton before finally reaching your brain with the message, you have made a terrible mistake. The human is under my protection, Cricstall announced, and suddenly the cell felt a lot smaller with 9 feet of very unhappy apex predator taking up most of it. Velter's 4 eyes went wide. Impossible. Scarven warriors do not protect prey species. Jake Morrison is not prey, Cricstall replied, and I felt a warm, fuzzy feeling that was either pride or the onset of a heart attack. He is pack leader. I couldn't help myself. I grinned at the captain. What he said, though I prefer logistics coordinator on my business cards. That's when Velter made her second mistake of the day. Her first mistake was assuming I'd be dead by now. Her second was deciding that, since Plan A hadn't worked, she'd move straight to Plan Z, overwhelming force applied liberally until the problem went away. Stun them both, she ordered. We'll space them and report it as an attempted escape. The security team raised their weapons, which was when I discovered that Cricstall moved faster than anything that big had any right to. 1 second he was standing next to me, the next he was airborne, claws extended, making a sound like a freight train full of angry hornets. The first guard didn't even have time to scream. But here's the thing about humans that the galaxy keeps forgetting. We might not be the biggest, or the strongest, or the fastest, but we are absolutely, unquestionably, the most creative when it comes to violence. While Cricstall was demonstrating why you don't threaten his pack leader, I was busy implementing what military tacticians call environmental warfare, and everyone else calls fighting dirty. The cell's ventilation grate made an excellent projectile weapon. The power coupling for the door controls made an even better improvised explosive device when you knew which wires to cross. And the emergency foam fire suppressant system made a fantastic area denial weapon when you hacked it to deploy at maximum pressure. Within 30 seconds, our cozy little cell had become a war zone, filled with foam, sparks, screaming guards, and one very enthusiastic apex predator who was finally getting to do what millions of years of evolution had designed him for. Jake, Cricstall called out over the chaos. The door control. I was already on it. The thing about human technology versus alien technology is that humans build everything with the assumption that someday someone's going to try to break it, hack it, or use it for something it wasn't designed for. Alien tech, apparently, assumes everyone's going to follow the manual. 3 pulled wires and 1 creative application of my belt buckle later, the cell door slid open. "After you," I said politely to Cricstall, who was currently holding 2 unconscious guards in 1 clawed hand like they were rag dolls. Captain Velter, meanwhile, was backed against the wall, her weapon drawn but trembling in her grip. "This is impossible," she kept repeating. "Humans are prey, humans are harmless, this cannot be happening." "Captain," I said, stepping over the remains of what used to be a security door, "I think it's time someone updated your species database. Humans aren't prey. We're not predators, either, technically speaking." Saul appeared beside me, still carrying his unconscious trophies. "What are humans?" he asked, genuinely curious. I smiled, and I like to think it was the kind of smile that would have made my ancestors proud, the ones who looked at a mammoth and thought, "I bet I could take that thing." "We're problem solvers," I said, "and right now, you're our problem." The look of dawning comprehension on Veltara's face was almost worth the whole prisoner transport experience. Almost. "Now then," I continued, stepping into the corridor as alarms began blaring throughout the ship. "Let's go have a chat with your navigation officer. I have some thoughts about our final destination." Behind us, emergency foam was still spraying from the ventilation system, covering everything in a thick white blanket. Ahead of us, the ship's crew was scrambling to respond to what their instruments were probably telling them was a catastrophic system failure in the detention area. "I like your problem-solving methods," Cricstall observed as we moved down the corridor. "Just wait," I replied, pulling out my multi-tool and eyeing the security cameras with professional interest. "We're just getting started." The beautiful thing about alien ship design is that it's incredibly logical. Everything's labeled, color-coded, and organized according to galactic standard protocols. Which means if you know the protocols, and I'd spent 3 years smuggling through ships exactly like this one, you can navigate them blindfolded. The terrible thing about alien ship design is that it's designed by beings who've never had to deal with humans. "Left here," I directed Cricstall as we moved through the maintenance corridors. The big guy had figured out how to move quietly despite being 9 feet of muscle and scales, which was impressive considering the ship's gravity plating wasn't designed for his weight. Every step he took made the deck plates creak ominously. "How do you know the ship's layout?" he asked, carefully maneuvering around a cluster of power conduits. "I've been on 17 ships of this class," I replied, pulling up a schematic on my smuggled tablet. "Spend quality time in their cargo holds, maintenance sections, and, unfortunately, their detention areas. You learn the blueprints when your life depends on finding alternate routes." The alarms were still blaring, and I could hear boots pounding through the corridors above us as the crew scrambled to figure out what was happening. Through the ship's internal comm system, I could make out fragments of increasingly panicked conversations. "Detention level secure, no sign of breach." "Then how did they get out?" "Unknown prisoners in Maintenance Section 7. "That's impossible. Sensors show Maintenance 7 is flooded with fire suppressant." I grinned. The beautiful thing about hacking a ship's emergency systems is that once you get them confused, they stay confused. Right now, the ship's computer thought there was a massive fire in our old cell, a hull breach on Deck 12, and a complete atmospheric failure in the cargo bay. The crew was running in circles trying to respond to disasters that existed only in the ship's increasingly paranoid electronic brain. "Here," I said, stopping at a maintenance hatch marked with alien symbols that roughly translated to authorized personnel only. "This should put us right behind the bridge." Cricstall examined the hatch with professional interest. "It is secured." "Not for long." I pulled out my multi-tool and started working on the locking mechanism. "You know, back on Earth we have a saying, if you can't get through the front door, try the window. If there's no window, make one. This wisdom served your species well. We're still here, aren't we?" The lock clicked open, and I gestured for Cricstall to go first. He squeezed through the hatch with surprising grace, and I followed, emerging into a small maintenance alcove directly behind the bridge's main power distribution panel. Through the thin bulkhead I could hear Captain Veltero's voice, tight with stress and barely controlled panic. "Report," she was demanding. "Security Teams 7 and 12 are not responding," came a nervous reply. "Teams 3 and 5 report no contact with the escaped prisoners." How does a single human and a Scarvan warrior simply vanish on a ship this size? "Unknown, Captain. Sensors are showing multiple system failures throughout the ship. I looked at Cricstall and held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. On 0, I kicked open the maintenance panel and rolled out onto the bridge, while Cricstall came through the main entrance like a force of nature. The bridge crew's reaction was everything I could have hoped for. Half of them froze in place, the other half scrambled for weapons they weren't wearing, and Captain Velter made a sound like a deflating balloon. "Surprise," I announced cheerfully, pulling myself up to the main console. "Hope you don't mind us dropping by unannounced." The navigation officer, a nervous-looking creature with too many eyes and not enough backbone, started reaching for what was probably an alarm button. Cricstall helpfully placed one massive claw on his shoulder. "I would not recommend that," the Predator rumbled pleasantly. "Wise advice," I agreed, quickly scanning the bridge layout. "Now, let's have a little chat about our travel itinerary." Captain Velter had found her voice, though it was about 2 octaves higher than usual. "This is mutiny, piracy. You cannot simply take control of a Council enforcement vessel." "Technically," I said, sliding into the pilot's chair like I owned it, "this isn't mutiny because I was never part of your crew. And it's not piracy because I'm not keeping your ship. I'm just borrowing it to solve a small navigation problem." My fingers flew over the controls, muscle memory taking over. The thing about spending years running from Council ships is that you learn how they work, especially their weaknesses, like the fact that their security protocols assume anyone accessing the main systems is authorized to be there. "What are you doing?" Velter demanded, watching in horror as I brought up the ship's navigation and communications arrays. "Updating our flight plan," I replied, pulling up the current course heading. "See, you had us scheduled for Gehenna Prime, which is frankly insulting. Do I look like someone who belongs in a prison labor camp? You are a smuggler and a criminal. I prefer independent logistics specialist with flexible ethics. And speaking of logistics," I brought up the ship's manifest and started scrolling through the cargo listings. "Oh, this is interesting. Captain, did you know you're carrying a shipment of military-grade plasma conduits in your cargo bay?" The sudden silence on the bridge was telling. Plasma conduits that are, according to this manifest, being transported without proper hazardous materials documentation. That's a serious violation of Council shipping regulations, the kind of violation that carries a mandatory prison sentence. Velter's mandibles were clicking so fast it sounded like an angry typewriter. "Those conduits are classified military cargo." "Not according to your own manifest, they're not. According to this, they're listed as recreational equipment, which is either the most creative accounting I've ever seen, or someone's been very naughty." I could see the realization dawning on her face. The same Council regulations she'd been using to justify shipping me off to a death world could be turned around and used against her. "But here's the thing," I continued, making a few adjustments to our course heading. "I'm not actually interested in causing trouble for hard-working Council officers. I'm a reasonable being. So here's what's going to happen." I swiveled the chair around to face her, and I have to admit, I was enjoying this way too much. "You're going to change our destination to somewhere a bit more neutral, somewhere with good food, reasonable accommodations, and most importantly, no extradition treaties with the Council. In exchange, I'll make sure that manifest error gets corrected, and nobody has to know about your little shipping irregularities." "You're blackmailing me." "I'm negotiating. There's a difference. Blackmail implies I'm going to do something harmful. I'm just pointing out that we're all reasonable beings who can find a mutually beneficial solution to our current situation." Cricstall, who had been watching this exchange with fascination, leaned forward. "This is how humans establish dominance? Through manipulation of bureaucratic systems?" "Pummel of many methods," I replied. "We've found that the pen is indeed mightier than the sword, especially when the pen can fill out the right paperwork to get the sword confiscated." Captain Velter looked like she was having some kind of existential crisis. You're not going to kill us?" "Where would I kill you? That would be messy, complicated, and frankly bad for my reputation. I'm a smuggler, not a pirate. I have professional standards." I turned back to the navigation console and input our new destination, Freeport Station, a notorious haven for beings who preferred to conduct their business outside the reach of Council law. "There we go," I announced as the ship's engines adjusted to our new heading. "Estimated arrival in 18 hours. That should give everyone time to process what's happened here and maybe update some cultural databases." "Cultural databases?" the navigation officer squeaked. "Well, yes. Clearly, the Council's information about humans is woefully out of date. We're not actually the harmless little prey species you thought we were. We're something much more dangerous." "What?" Velter whispered. I smiled, and I made sure it was the kind of smile that would haunt her dreams. "We're creative." 18 hours later, Freeport Station grew larger in the view screen like a beautiful, chaotic Christmas tree made of questionable life choices and tax evasion. The station was a patchwork of different architectural styles, bolted together over the decades by species who valued function over form and profit over permits. It was, in other words, exactly the kind of place where two escaped prisoners could disappear into the background noise of galactic commerce. Captain Velter had spent most of the journey in what I can only describe as a state of philosophical shock. She kept staring at me like I was some kind of puzzle she couldn't solve, which, to be fair, I probably was. Her entire worldview had been built around the assumption that the universe was an orderly place, where prey species stayed prey and predators stayed predictably predatory. Humans, as usual, had failed to read the manual. "Docking request approved," came the cheerful voice of Freeport Station's traffic controller. "Welcome to Freeport, where your business is your business, and your credits spend the same as everyone else's." I loved this place already. "Captain," I said, swiveling around in the pilot's chair one last time, "it's been a real pleasure traveling with you. Thanks for the hospitality, the educational experience, and the reminder that the galaxy still has a lot to learn about Earth." Velter just stared at me. "You're really just leaving?" "Well, yes. What did you think I was going to do? Start a rebellion, conquer your ship, paint humans were here on the hull in bright colors?" I stood up and stretched, working out the kinks from 18 hours of flying. "I told you, I'm not a pirate. I'm a smuggler. Big difference. But you could take this ship. You could sell it, use it for your criminal activities." "Captain," I said gently, "that would be theft. I may be a lot of things, but I'm not a thief. Well, technically I am a thief, but only of things that people aren't supposed to have anyway. There's a moral distinction there." Cricstall, who had spent the journey studying Earth documentarians and asking increasingly disturbing questions about human society, rose from where he'd been sitting. "Jake Morrison, you have shown me that the universe is stranger than I believed possible." "That's what humans do best," I replied. "We make things complicated." "I wish to accompany you," he announced, and I could see Captain Velter's eyes start twitching again. "You've proven yourself to be a worthy pack leader." "Pack leader?" "On Scarven, the strongest leads. But you have shown me that among humans the cleverest leads. This is acceptable to me." I couldn't help but grin. "Well, I do happen to be in the market for a business partner. The smuggling trade is getting more competitive these days. Having someone around who can open doors, literally and figuratively, might be useful." 20 minutes later, Cricstall and I were walking down Freeport Station's main concourse, two unlikely partners in what was about to become the galaxy's most interesting smuggling operation. Behind us, the vengeance of Zalkar was already preparing to depart, probably eager to put as much distance as possible between themselves and the humans who had turned their understanding of the universe inside out. "So," Cricstall said, looking around at the station's eclectic mix of beings, "what do we do now?" "Now," I replied, pulling out my tablet and scrolling through the local job listings, "we find ourselves a ship, a cargo manifest, and a client with more money than sense. The galaxy is a big place, full of people who need things moved from here to there without too many questions being asked. And if the council tries to stop us?" I paused at a job posting for someone willing to transport agricultural supplies to a system that was definitely not known for its farming. The pay was suspiciously good, which meant the agricultural supplies were probably something much more interesting. "Well," I said, flagging the listing for follow-up, "they'll try, but here's the thing about humans that I don't think the council really understands yet." "What is that?" "We don't like being told we can't do something. In fact, telling a human they can't do something is pretty much the most effective way to ensure they'll find a way to do it. It's like a species-wide character flaw." Cricstall's tail swished in what I was learning was his version of amusement. "This explains much about your documentary footage." "Oh, that was just the nature programs. Wait until you see what we do when we're actually trying to be difficult." 3 months later, the Lucky Strike, our newly acquired, only slightly illegal cargo vessel, was making the jump to hyperspace with a hold full of definitely not weapons heading for a system that officially didn't exist. Cricstall had turned out to be an excellent partner, combining his natural intimidation factor with a surprisingly keen grasp of interstellar commerce law. We'd also picked up a reputation. Word travels fast in the smuggling community, and apparently, the story of a human and a Scarven warrior who had taken over a council enforcement ship through a combination of chocolate, nature documentaries, and creative paperwork had become something of a legend. "Jake," Cricstall said from the co-pilot seat, "I have been monitoring council communications. They have issued new guidelines regarding human prisoners. Oh, what kind of guidelines? Humans are no longer to be housed with predator species. They are to be kept in individual cells with enhanced security protocols, and all transport personnel are required to complete additional training on atypical prisoner psychology. I laughed. Atypical prisoner psychology. I like that. Has a nice ring to it. There is more. The Council has also updated their species database entry for humans. Really? What does it say now? Cricstall pulled up the official document and read it aloud. Species designation: Homo sapiens. Classification: unpredictable. Threat level: variable. Special handling requirements: do not assume standard behavioral patterns apply. Exercise extreme caution when making assumptions about capability or intent. Note: this species exhibits highly adaptive problem-solving behaviors and should not be underestimated under any circumstances. Well, I said, settling back in my chair as the stars streaked past. It's not Shakespeare, but it's better than harmless dirt farmers with delusions of grandeur. They still do not understand, do they? Cricstall observed. They think this is about humans being dangerous. No, I agreed. They don't get it at all. They're still thinking in terms of predators and prey, strong and weak. They haven't figured out the real secret yet. Which is? I smiled, watching the hyperspace tunnel flow around our ship like a river of light, carrying us toward our next adventure. The real secret isn't that humans are dangerous or unpredictable or any of that stuff. The real secret is that we're adaptable. Put us in a cage, we'll figure out how to pick the lock. Put us on a death world, we'll call it home. Try to feed us to a predator, we'll make friends with it and start a business together. And that is why the Council fears you. The Council doesn't fear humans yet, I said, but they should. Because there's one more thing about humans that they haven't figured out. What is that? I pulled up our next job listing. A request to transport scientific equipment to a research station in the Outer Rim. The pay was excellent, the destination was lovely this time of year, and the client was offering a substantial bonus for discretion. We're not the ones locked out here with them, I said, accepting the contract with a few keystrokes. They're the ones locked in here with us. Cricstall's laugh was like an avalanche having a good time. I am very glad you decided to share that chocolate with me, Jake Morrison. So am I, partner. So am I. And somewhere in the depths of space, the Lucky Strike continued its journey through the galaxy, carrying two unlikely friends toward whatever adventure waited at the other end of hyperspace. Behind us, the Council continued updating their databases and protocols, still trying to figure out how to deal with a species that refused to fit into their carefully organized categories. They'd figure it out eventually. Or maybe they wouldn't. Either way, it was going to be fun to watch them try.